All right, we're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the third rail. I am your host, Omar. I would like to thank you for joining us and watching this podcast. I have a special guest today. He has been a lawyer for more than 30 years. He represents the bail bond industry, and his name is Ken W. Goods. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am. I'm glad to have you here. I want to I usually ask the person that I'm interviewing is, who are they as a human being? Who are you, Mr. Goods, as a human being?
Who am I as a human being?
Yeah, as a
A Christian, I guess, probably the way I was raised. That would be the first thing I would say. I'm a husband, married to another attorney. We have two children, growing up quickly. I am the father, the son of two public school teachers who taught me to work hard. And if you work hard, that you will be rewarded. And I have probably spent my entire life working hard.
No, I'm glad. You know, you're the first person who answered that question, right? I've been doing this more than what? You're my 57 interview. And when I ask them who they are, the person, they start talking about their career. I want to know who you are. You're a father, a son. You know, I want to see who the human person in you. Okay, sir. Welcome to the. Okay, can you give us your educational background?
Sure. Graduated from high school, went to Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, Texas, second generation. My parents actually went there, and that's where they met. So a small Christian university in Abilene, Texas. I got a master's degree in education from Texas A&M Tarleton, which is is in Stephenville, Texas. And then I went to law school at Texas Tech in the Panhandle in Lubbock. And I have been an attorney since 1989.
What kind of attorney were you practicing? What did you?
Well, you know, I started out practicing. I started out representing doctors in hospitals when they got sued. I've always had an interest in appellate law, so even in law school. So I did a lot of appellate work in medical malpractice cases and other cases. I've argued cases across the state and even in the federal system. Probably about 25 years ago, I started representing bondsmen, and I now am Texas counsel for several insurance companies. I represent bondsmen across the state. I've argued several of the most important cases in the bail industry at the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas. And I'm a member of the board of directors of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. I'm on their legislative team, and we go to the legislature and argue for or against bills that affect our industry.
Okay, what is the bail bond industry? I mean, how much is it worth? What does it does? I mean, is it a big industry in the United States?
Well, you know, I would say I know Texas, so I will concentrate on Texas. The bail industry has been around for over 200 years. So it's been around for a long time. I think, you know, periodically we get calls to change or replace the bail industry, and they usually fail because nobody does it better than the bail industry. And we always try to replace it with something that doesn't work. And what we do well. I mean, we do one thing well, and that's get people to go to court. And so if you want your cases to be resolved more quickly, if you want victims to have a resolution more quickly, you want the bail industry to be bailing out those defendants. And then if you don't care if people come to court, then you don't need us.
I know, but how much is it in dollar value, that industry?
You know, I don't keep up with dollar amounts. I just know that, you know, we have the lowest failure to peer rate of any released mechanism. And so I don't know of any statistics in Texas about what the bail industry is or what its value is. I mean, it is a business. It's across the state of Texas. It's made up by mom and pop small business owners, second generation sometimes, and I've known a couple of third generation bondsmen. So that only happens if people operate like businesses and they do their business well.
Is it a profitable business?
I think it can be. You know, if you take care of business, then it can be profitable. But if you don't take care of business, you won't be in business very long.
Yeah. Okay. You said you have an issue with the latest, you know, defund the police, all these crazy ideas. My friends, the liberals, I'm a liberal, by the way, who are going nuts a little bit. What's this about the bail reform? What is that? What do you want to reform about the bail bondsman industry?
Well, I think initially, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we were told we have to change bail because it's going to be held unconstitutional.
Right.
And so we have to change the way we're doing it. In the interim, the opposite's been true. Bail has been held constitutional.
Right.
And so then we hear the argument that, well, we need to change what we're doing because it's just not fair. It's not fair we have to treat everybody the same. And so I think the focus now is on fairness. And I think that that's is a false argument, false narrative, because, I don't think the legal or the criminal justice system seeks to treat everybody the same. We want to treat people that have substantial criminal histories more severely than people that are arrested for the first time. So to say that we need to treat everybody the same is a false narrative. We need to apply just the right amount of pressure to each individual to get them to comply with the law going forward. And someone with a substantial criminal history needs more pressure than a first-time offender. And so I think that's true about bail. Sometimes, if you have a substantial criminal history, then you're at a greater risk of not coming to court. And so your bond needs to be higher. And then in some severe situations, you shouldn't be released from jail.
In other words, like a credit card score, right? Like, is that can you put it down, right? I mean, the worse you are as a criminal, the more it should be expensive to give you a bond, right? Is that what you're trying to say? Sir?
Yeah, okay. But I will tell you, I think the problem that we have in the bail reform movement is it's the same problem that nobody can find a solution to, and that is, how do we release large numbers of people in our urban areas? How do we process them through the jail quickly and efficiently? There's a couple of ways that are constitutional. We know they're proper, and then we go out on these limbs and try these things that just don't work. So historically, we know that individual magistration works, but that's very costly when you're processing large numbers of people. Historically, we've used bail schedules. That's what have been under attack for the last few years. And so we're abandoning those, even though the Fifth Circuit has said they're constitutional if you provide safeguards for the poor. Oh, yeah. So we were switching to what they've done in New York and Harris County, which is just simple release, where you're released without ever seeing a magistrate, or when you get there, like in New York, they're told they have to release you with no bail, no matter what your criminal history is. And that's where we're having problems. We have no gatekeeper, nobody's holding people accountable, and that's what's a complete failure. Is they're trying to replace the bail industry with simple release, and that's just not working.
So what I want to ask you, Ken, is that before the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever you want to call it, my English is not as great as you are, but 43% of Americans didn't have $500 for a rainy day, for a problem. Like if an emergency came up, they didn't have more than $500 in the bank to fix it. So that means they'll be in a hole. So how do you deal with those families that say they make a simple mistake, or they do something? People do stupid things once in a while. They drink a lot, whatever. So how do you do with those people who might end up going in jail? They can't afford to get out. Then they lose their job. They lose. Then it's like a snowball thing. Then they can't pay maybe their mortgages or pay their bills, and all of a sudden they're in a hole.
Well, we hear those arguments all the time, and it just makes it sound like our whole criminal justice system is made up of first-time offenders. Right. And what we forget is we have organized crime, we have career criminals, and we have people that are just mischief makers. We have like gangs, and that's what we forget. And so I would argue, respectfully, with the assumption that our jails are full of first-time offenders, and especially now with the pandemic, that's absolutely not true. Yeah. But I think even before, I don't believe our jails are full of first-time offenders. I think our criminal justice system is, like I've said, we want to mete out the pressure needed for the crime or the criminal history. And so someone who's arrested on a first-time offense, I think they have always been treated differently. We hear, well, these people are going to lose their jobs. I think that's all based on science that is coming from the left, and it's not really science. It's just those are common sense arguments. Somebody who's in jail is going to lose their job if they stay in jail very long. Yeah, it's true for everybody. But the point I want to make is when we make reform, or when we set up reforms, if we set them up with good intentions to protect the first-time offender, But in doing so, we tie the hands of the judges so they can't address career criminals or organized crime or gangs. Well, then this is what causes crime to increase because we're not giving the judges the discretion to address the real bad elements of society because of our intention to make sure that the first-time offenders are protected. I just disagree that that's what needs to happen or that the jails are full of those people. And I would argue that in doing that, we're actually causing crime to increase because of the career criminals and gangs and organized crime.
Okay, I want to ask you, where's the starting point? Let's say if I commit a crime, where's the starting point for me? Oh, what kind of crime I have to commit to qualify for, I mean, to be, to have to put a bond or what do you call it, a bail bond? I've never been a criminal, so I don't know even what it's called, a bail bond thing, where I have to pay something to get out of jail. Where's the starting point? I mean, a burglar, car thief, jaywalker, guy who jumped the train truant style. I mean, where does it start?
Well, like in Texas, we would classify it as C, misdemeanor, B, misdemeanor, A, misdemeanor, C, the lowest, B, higher, A, higher. And then we start state jail felony, then we felony, then we have our capital offenses. And so we have a spectrum. And where you fall on there, I think should depend on your criminal history. So you're arrested on a Class B misdemeanor. So that's like almost a traffic ticket. But if you have a substantial criminal history, I think your bond should be different than if you were a first-time offender and got arrested for Class B theft or a Class B something else. I mean, I think it all should flow off of your criminal history. And then I think, in Texas, they set bond at an amount that will ensure that will be sufficiently high to give you an incentive to appear for court.
Okay, I mean, some people will say, listen, we live in a society that's not what they call systemic racism, whatever you want to call that. Minorities or black criminals are look at different than an urban, not an urban, a suburban criminal who, good-looking kid, and all that stuff. Is there fair justice in the United States? Is justice blind in the United States? Is it really blind?
Well, I mean, I would say we have the fairest justice system of the world.
Right.
Is there room for improvement? Yes. But I would dispute, and I think there would be people on the left that would disagree with me, but I would dispute that we have systemic racism in our justice system, especially in our urban areas. What we have is drug problems, severe drug problems in our urban areas. We have schools that have failed in our urban areas. We have families that have failed in our urban areas. And so what we have is, and now with the riots or the protests from 2020, we have less business opportunity, less job opportunity because businesses that were burned didn't come back. And so you have people in the urban areas that have substantial crime going on. And I think it's because of all those things. And I don't think that is because of a specific race. I think that's because everybody that can afford to move out of those urban areas has moved out, and the people that are left or minorities. But that's not a systemic racist problem. That is a societal problem where they're the victims of a lot of things, but they're victims of where schools have failed and families have failed. And I think that has more to do with it than anything else. And the drug problem, the massive drug problem we have in our urban cities.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example here. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong. I mean, you're a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. During the crack epidemic, crack users and the dealers were considered criminals. They were both jailed. You understand? A lot of black people went to jail. I was a young kid and I saw this toxic ecosystem. I lived in minority neighborhoods. I'm from New York, from Brooklyn, New York. And I saw this, as a kid, I used to observe all this toxicity. The kids are selling drugs to their neighbors, and their neighbors are losing their jobs. It was a destructive behavior. But my question is here, the addicts were treated as criminals and went to jail. But right now we have the opiate crisis, which is affecting like white America. Excuse me, I don't want to use race as suburban America. It's treated as a medical problem instead of a criminal record. So you understand what I'm saying? If you smoke crack as a black man, you went to jail for 3, 4, 5 years. But if you're an opiate user right now in this day and age, you are treated as a medical issue. You need help. It's a health issue. It has nothing. You should not be putting. So you understand how sometimes people say, "Oh, it's not fair. The justice system is not really blind." You know what I'm trying to get at here?
Well, I don't. Okay, so let me state it a different way, because I think we have people who saw that history of, and they would say, well, the war on drugs failed, and I don't agree with that. I would say right now we're in a period where we're suffering the consequences of all of that knowledge and all of that expense, and now we're saying, well, we want to put it somewhere else, and we want to put it in other programs, and so we want to try something different. I don't think it's because it's a opiate versus crack. I think it's because of the history of the expense. Now, I think the change in theory is wrong, though, because I think so much of our crime is in our society is built off of the drug trade. And so when we have groups that are pushing for rehab, we don't have the room for that. And so instead, it turns out to be we're pushing them to that, but we're really not doing anything. We're giving them a class, and we're giving them a little booklet. We're saying you're successful, and then we're pushing them off so that they can do their next hit, find their next drugs, go commit more crime so they can get money to get drugs. And so I think we're actually seeing the effects of the drug epidemic even go higher. And I think that's one of the things that's causing crime, because we really have quit fighting the war on drugs. And we have this myth of we're going to concentrate on rehab, but we're not. I mean, we don't have any way to make somebody to go to rehab if we're not going to arrest them. If we're not threatening them with jail to give them an incentive to go to rehab, then they're not going to go.
Yeah, I was going to save this for later, but I'm going to ask you now, since we're talking about it. Should drugs be legalized?
No, because the basis of so much of our crime in the United States is built off of the drug trade. If we make drugs legal, we are turning over so much of our country to the control of cartels, to the drug trade, to gangs. I mean, look at the statistics from Colorado just legalizing marijuana. I mean, they've added so much tax burden and regulation on that you're starting to see more and more people return to illegal sources to buy it, because we've tried to overregulate it. And that was the whole argument. Oh, we make it legal, we're going to make it safe. Well, we're doing the opposite. People are returning. And also it's not even safe to say, well, it's not even appropriate to say, well, what's the number of driving accidents that have increased because of the use of people driving under the influence of marijuana. And so we're told we can't talk about those things, or we're shamed if we even try to. But no, we should not legalize these drugs, because they're the source of so many crimes that are driving our criminal justice system. If it's not the outright use of drugs, it's theft or finding ways to get money to go buy drugs. And I read a book one time that said, if you were able to address the number of crimes that arise from the drug trade, it would be an astronomical percentage of the total number of crimes committed. So if we give up and we legalize drugs, we're giving up on crime.
Yeah, I understand. See, there's some European country that does that. Like I know it's Holland, I think, where they even give heroin. Whoever addicted, they go to a certain center once a day or twice a day. They go get their shot free from the government or whatever. I don't know what drug they give them to substitute for heroin, and they go to work, they hold their job. They're addicts already. They can't do anything. But the idea is, if you give it to them and have it in a clean, safe place, you take the cartels out of the picture, because you don't need no drug dealers if the government is doing it, or if there are clinics that's doing it, or nonprofit organization that's doing it. Second of all, the person doesn't have to go steal a car or burglarize or beat up a grandma down the street at a grocery store to get $5 to go get a heroin or whatever. You understand? So you take the mat from under the criminals once you make it available. Once it becomes available, even prostitution. Are you in favor of legalizing that? I was going to ask you all this later, but I'm sorry I had to push you in because you brought it up. Because
okay, so let's talk about prostitution for a minute. If you legalize prostitution, then this is what happens, because it's already been threatened. You have somebody, cute girl, who wants to turn down a job offer working in a place of prostitution. well, if we legalize prostitution, if they're offered that job, then they no longer are entitled to unemployment because they were offered a job and they turned it down. And so that's ludicrous. We should not. I mean, we should as a country stand for something. And so why are we turning to all of these moral issues and saying, well, let's legalize that. Let's manufacture and distribute drugs, and so just give them away free. That's going to decrease crime if we just get. I mean, are you going to make everybody addicted to drugs? I know we're talking about a very small country, but we're trying to up it and put it on a scale of the United States of America, one of the largest countries in the world. And no, and you think about it, you're taking on the drug cartels when you do that. You're taking away their market share. You think they're going to just take that line down? No.
I mean, what does it matter? We do. Do I really care what the cartels think in Mexico? I'm the United States of America. You understand? Well, you see, Ken, I'm probably conservative socially like you are. You understand? When it comes to social issue, I don't agree with the stuff I'm telling you right now. It really doesn't really. I mean, I'm probably on the same side you're on, looking at it through the lens of family values and things like that. But the liberal in me, and to try to, because we have 2 million Americans in jail. We have the largest population jail in the world. We have in jail what amounts to 4 countries in the Persian Gulf. You know, the Arab Gulf countries. They are like 400,000. You know, that's crazy. You have 2 million Americans in jail.
But we also have the largest drug use in the world too.
That's what I'm saying.
You can't say, okay, we have the largest drug use of. I mean, this is where all the drugs go, and we can't. Well, we shouldn't punish everybody. We should have a disproportionate punishment because we have a disproportionate use. Yeah, absolutely. We have a large prison population because all the drugs come to the United States.
I know, but most of these people in jail are for dumb stuff. The majority were for marijuana use or for little.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that the majority of the people in our prison are marijuana use.
Well,
the majority of the people in our prison are, dangerous people that need to stay there with gang members.
But not 2 million. I mean, 2 million.
You don't. Well, we don't have 2 million marijuana users in the jail either.
I know, but you don't have 2 million killers. We'd be all dead. You understand?
Well, we don't know. I mean,
the whole idea, what I'm trying to get at, I understand your position. Ken, you probably raised in Texas, conservative family, true Christian and stuff like that. But there are these little things we could get rid of, like sex workers in Holland. They work clean, safe place, no sex trafficking, no pimp, no middleman. They don't go to jail. They go to a storefront, they work, they pay taxes, the government benefit, they clean, they get the cleanup bill of health all the time. So you prevent the sexual transmitted disease. You get the pimp out of the way. You get the sex trafficking of children and young women from country to country to sell them to prostitution. And not everybody wants to be a prostitute. I grew up in the worst neighborhood in Brooklyn. I never did any marijuana. I never did any of this. I drank. Not everybody's going to fall into that trap. So my idea is that if a woman goes to a bar and drinks the whole night and probably have intimate relation with 3 men, it's okay. But if God forbid she takes $20, we have to arrest her and we have to call your company to put some bail bond to get her out. You know what I'm trying to say here? There are certain things we could get rid of and save money in the long run and get rid of all this and concentrate on the real crimes. You know,
that's kind of one of the arguments we keep hearing. I have there's a state senator in Texas that says, we should only be putting the people in jail who we're afraid of, not the people we're mad at. And, I think one of the reasons why we're going through this crime increase right now is I think that a lot of people that are being arrested on crimes that make you mad are hearing those things. And they're hearing and they're seeing that as a green light to commit more crime. And so they're right now trying to figure out how mad they can make us without getting held accountable. And so right now there's in New York and Texas, you're seeing, like in Harris County, you're seeing a lot of people trying to make us mad.
Well, we have an issue here in New York. A lot of people were let out and our crime just jumped up to the roof with petty criminals and all that stuff. But the problem, there's a phenomenon going on in the United States. Crime all of a sudden just went up, shot up. While we were all at home, we were quarantined at home, and we have more murder, more violent crime. Why? Why do you think that? Why did we reverse while you're going down through the last 20 years? Crime was actually going down in the United States. Now all of a sudden it's going up in even red states, Tennessee, all over.
Well, I think you're seeing the biggest increases in our urban areas, and
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem. A lot of those urban areas attempted some criminal justice reform that involves some type of bail reform. So I think a lot of the crime that we're seeing increases because of those types of things. I think you also see the defund the police movement. I think the defund the police movement has been a fiasco. And also, when you
Yeah.
take money away from the police departments, and then at the same time you release significant numbers of criminals from the jail. I mean, A plus B equals C. When you lower the police on the streets and you increase the criminals on the streets, there's going to be an increase in crime. Add to that the pandemic, where there's been a substantial increase in family violence situations because they're stuck in the house with their assailant. And also, as a result, you see crime go up everywhere. You see drug use go up everywhere. You see suicide increase substantially. You see depression increase. And so we just have bad decisions being made everywhere. I think during the pandemic, when we were saying, well, let's just release people because we don't want the jails full of people with COVID, I think that was a review or a kind of a preview of what some of these criminal justice reform proposals would look like, because we put them into effect immediately. And you got example after example of people being rearrested multiple times within a day because
Right.
they just, hey, if you keep releasing me and telling me no consequences, I'm going to accept that and I'm going to commit more crime. And, Harris County, they're keeping track of like almost 200 people who have been killed by people who were out on a PR bond, or somebody who was out after they'd already been accused of murdering one person. They were out on bond, a very low bond, and commit another murder. So we've kind of quit. We've given up on the concept of accountability. We're no longer holding people accountable. It's not the first time offenders. It's you get arrested for the fourth time, you don't show up for court 5 or 6 times, and we're still giving you that second chance. Well, when are we going to stop with the 6th or 7th chance? I mean, where are we going to start holding people accountable? That's got to be part of this analysis of why crime is increasing. We've just quit holding people accountable.
In the I think it was the 2000, we had the highest murder rate in New York, in the United States. I think the 90. I don't know. It was when Mayor Giuliani first began. They had this good idea. It was called the broken window policy. The broken window policy was, if you get the small crimes, you're gonna prevent the big crime. And I agree with that. I lived through that era. It was dangerous. You could not walk. We had people drinking in the street. The police will come, take the beer bottles and break them down until you go home. We'll give you a ticket or take you to jail. So why can't we do that again? I mean, prevent like people who used to jump the turnstile in the train. Mostly were either wanted or had a record. They didn't show up. So they were cleaning up the street. It was good. I understand, but I mean, why can't we have those policies back without really?
I really agree with that. I think that's a very important point. And we're kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum right now. The pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. We're now saying, well, we shouldn't hold the people on the nonviolent offenses criminal because, they shouldn't be, those people that we should be releasing. And so we're kind of doing the opposite. And I think that's exactly what the problem is in fact, I think it's a bad situation for those people when they get arrested, and they get arrested 3 times for the same crime. Like in Harris County, they never see a magistrate. They're released on a $100 PR bond every time because nobody's looking at their criminal history. They see that as a green light, and they commit more and more crime. And as they get more bold, they commit more severe crime. And when they finally do cross the line, now they're in a much worse situation than if we had just done the broken windows approach. Maybe we would have gotten them turned around and become productive citizens without. Now they're going to be looking at substantial jail time unless we just kind of give up on accountability completely.
Why do you think a country as rich as our country, a democratic country as ours, why do we have so much crime? I mean, we have the best researchers, the best education, the state from the what do you call it, from the cradle to the grave, some welfare states. Why do you think we have a violent society or criminal society? I mean, I don't want to.
Well, I think part of it is we have to go back and say, do we believe that people are good people or do we believe people are bad people? I mean, when you go down to someone's very nature, I mean, I think we have to start with, well, are we good or are we bad? And I mean, us, as Christians, we believe that our very nature is bad until we accept Christ and pursue a personal relationship with him. And so I would say that I kind of fall on the side that we have a nature that can get us in trouble. And so I think when you add drugs to it,
Yeah.
or you add broken homes to it, or
Yeah.
you add failed schools, then it's a recipe for disaster. And, we are we are the richest country in the world, but we're making really bad choices. We're throwing lots of monies at the inner city schools and it's being wasted because it's not helping. We're throwing money in California to building homes for homeless and it's not getting where it needs to be. And so they're not getting the benefits. And then we're throwing money at trying to keep families together, but it's not getting there. Even though we're throwing all this money at schools, the dropout rates in the inner cities is skyrocketing. We have all these benefits and these programs for rehabilitation for drug use, and it's not getting where it needs to be because we still have record drug use in the inner city. So I think part of the problem is we just have a political class that is just raping and pillaging our urban areas, and nobody's holding them accountable for that. And so as long as that continues, we're throwing away so much money in our urban areas. And now we're going to the criminal justice system and saying, well, instead of saying, hey, this is their last chance to become productive citizens, we're giving up on them there too. And that's got to stop.
What role has the bail reform played in the rise in crime?
I think it has played a substantial role in the rise in crime. There's a report from Harris County by the district attorney's office who has attributed rising crime to increase recidivism rate in the misdemeanor reforms that they did in Harris County. And I think it just makes common sense. If you get arrested, you never see a magistrate, you get released on $100 PR bond, and you get released within a blink of an eye, you go, well, they're never going to do anything to me. They're now dismissing 69% of the misdemeanor cases filed in Harris County. And they're saying, well, that's a sign that misdemeanor bail reform is working. No, that's a sign that the criminal justice system on misdemeanors in Harris County has collapsed because they created a system where no one gets punished for not showing up for court. In fact, their reform says you have to miss court at least 3 times before they can do anything to you. So you learn how to play the system. You just don't show up. And then over time, they just dismiss your case. And if you dismiss your case, the victims don't have justice. Then you're emboldened to commit more crime because crime pays in your mind. And so I think that criminal justice reform, where we've taken accountability out of the system, has really caused crime to increase. And it will continue to do so as long as we're not holding people accountable. And, the best thing we can do is, okay, you want to give somebody a break, give them a low bond, fine. If they don't show up for court, they got their break.
Right.
You want to give them a second chance? Okay. But you don't give them a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th case. I mean, there's an example in Harris County, and this is just one of many examples.
Yeah.
I was 35 years old. He'd been arrested over 70 times.
Wow.
And he killed this 80-year-old grandma in the parking lot of Walgreens. And at the time he killed her, he was out on 2 personal bonds, PR bonds, for felony cases. So they just didn't even want him in the jail. So they just released him.
What's a PR?
PR bond's a free bond. It's a bond without sureties where you're saying, hey, I will sign this piece of paper saying I'm going to show up for court. And so even though he had a substantial criminal history, over 70-something charges in the past, he had 2 felony cases pending. They released him on free bonds because they didn't want him in the jail. And he killed this 80-something-year-old grandma in the parking lot of Walgreens.
But I mean, if he did 70 times, I don't think he even should have bond at all. He should be in jail a long time ago.
He should not have been. And the problem is, if he hadn't gotten a PR bond, he wouldn't have been out of jail because no one was calling a bondsman.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 70 charges. Nobody was calling for him. That's the reason why the court gave him PR bonds. It's because his family had stopped. They were through with him. And so substantial felony bonds, he would have stayed in jail. But they just didn't want him. They wanted him out. So they gave him PR bonds.
I think I saw you on a video on YouTube by accident because I was trying to study you and I put your name. I think they had this thing about it was anti bail bond. They were saying that they're saying this the same talk. If people get arrested, they have $500 bond, they can afford it, they lose their job, and it rolls downhill from there. And they said they had that 90% of people came back to court who didn't have no bonds. I think I don't know. I'm not sure I heard that right. Do you have any statistics to?
Yes, surety bonds have the lowest failure to appear rate of any release system.
Right.
So if you want people to show up for court, you want more of them on our system. Personal bonds have the highest failure to appear rate of any release mechanism in use. So if, like PR bonds being used right now in misdemeanor courts in Harris County, over 60% of every docket, the people on PR bonds don't show up for court. And so what happens when you don't show up? That means your case gets put on hold. That means they can't go forward until you come back. And that might be just a couple of hours. It might be a couple of days. But if you get scared and you're on the run, then you may have to commit another crime to get pulled back into the system. And when you're on a bond with us, the system gives us authority to go look for you. And we have incentives for going and getting you and bringing you back. There's no other mechanism for release that does that. I mean, we provide supervision when you're out. And if we see a problem, we can approach the court to get a warrant for your arrest. And when we do that in Texas, we seek a warrant that gives the court special powers that they didn't have before we filed it. And so I think people don't realize we are true partners in the criminal justice system. And we like to describe ourselves as we're the grease that keeps the conveyor belt moving. Because like in Harris County, every week, 1,000 new misdemeanor cases are added to the conveyor belt.
How big is Harris County?
It's the biggest county in Texas, like over 3 million, I believe.
Big city, yeah.
And so it's like one of the biggest cities in the United States. But
yeah.
So it has, on average, 1,000 new misdemeanor cases added to the criminal justice system every week. Anything that slows you down and prevents you from resolving your 1,000 cases from the week before or your inventory, that just means your inventory backlog is going to increase. The problem that we have with the overuse of PR bonds in Harris County is causing a substantial backlog. Before the pandemic, their backlog had already doubled as a result of use of these PR bonds. So you can imagine what they are now.
Okay, somebody wrote, bail reform is something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Good job, folks. Oh, okay, thank you. He's telling us we're doing a good job. All right. So how do we solve the bail bond issue? I mean, some people will say, Ken, it's $500. It's nothing, but he's going to stay in jail 30 days. If you put the cost, it's going to cost the state about a couple $1,000s to keep him in jail than the $500 that he was about to lose. How do you answer that, Beth?
If you're arrested on a misdemeanor offense and they say, okay, we're going to give you, Omar, we're going to give you a PR bond. But just to make sure you're okay, we're going to give you a requirement to get a GPS monitor on your leg, on your ankle, and we're going to make you get some interlock on your car. What you've been ordered to do costs you 2 or 3 times what you would ever have to pay to a bondsman. And so we keep saying, well, okay, we can make sure they're okay with a PR bond and we can give them all these conditions. Those conditions price themselves out of the market. It makes it so that it's just terrible. And the $500, bondsmen today, they haven't been collecting all their fee before getting a bond posted in probably a couple of decades. We've been using payment plans. I mean, if you got, $100, so you can start a payment plan with a bondsman and get out of jail. I mean, we're small businesses. We work with people in the community. That's what we've done for decades, and that we would do with you. And especially if you, Omar, were a first-time offender and somebody gave you a bond, a bonding company would see you as someone that they would want to work with.
Right,
And
right.
here's why I think that there's a difference. There's three types of bonds. There's, a PR bond, a surety bond, and we call it a cash bond, which is just someone you put up cash. Instead of going to a bondsman and getting $1,000 bond, you put up $1,000 cash. But, these are wayward children. These are children who've kind of, are people who kind of didn't fit into society, or they've kind of gotten crossed with society, or they're drug addicts. Who's going to remind them to go to court? Who's going to call them up and check on them? When you don't show up for court on a PR bond, there's nobody going to look for you. It's just a warrant issued. The warrant goes down to the warrant department. In our urban areas, it joins hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of other warrants waiting to be served. But if you're on a surety bond, we're calling you to remind you to go to court. We're calling to check on you. We're requiring you to check in with us at least once a week. If it's a big enough bond, you may even have to come to our office. We may have an app that you use so that you have to check in. It tells us your GPS coordinates when you check in. So we're keeping up with you.
Yeah.
We have family members usually involved on our on certain size bonds. And if they come to us and say, Ken, Omar is back to using drugs.
Right.
Well, then we can go to the court and say, Omar's using drugs again. We want a warrant. Cash can't do that. PR bonds can't do that. PR bonds with a GPS monitor, and Intralink don't do that, and they cost much more than anything that we charge.
I was going to ask you that. I mean, do you think there's a feature in the GPS ankle monitor as we go ahead, with technology? I think you guys are going to be obsolete in 20 years if you have somebody.
They've been saying that probably for 200 years. The problem that we've got is people want to replace us now, but they're replacing us with systems that are creating chaos and are not working.
Ankles, how much would it cost to put an ankle on a person? I mean, it'd be cheap.
Sometimes it costs, I don't know, but I would say, let's say $50 to $200 a month.
Right.
I mean, if your case takes a year to get resolved, that's over $600 a year. If it takes 2 years to get resolved because they're a year backlog because of the pandemic, costs over $1,000. That's if it's only 50. If it's 100, or if it's 200, then you have made a huge investment in GPS, and then you've got examples of people cutting them off or doing it on the weekends because the sheriff's office doesn't have anybody there monitoring it on the weekends.
Yeah, but could you use a hybrid, like the violent criminals should get bonded or should be put in jail, or some idiot like Omar who jumped a turnstile or speeding or urinating?
The problem with that is it's that's kind of the federal system. The federal system has a catch and or a detain or release, and they don't use a lot of surety bonds. They can, some of them can, but most of them it's just a detain or release. The problem with that is they have a lot of presumptions for detention. So like almost all drug crimes would be detained, not released. And we don't have the infrastructure. I mean, the problem we have in California right now is the courts are ordering them to release people from the prisons. They're not building more prisons. They don't want to create more prisons. So we've got an infrastructure that wants to make a smaller number of beds available, which is causing people with criminal histories more to be released, which would then cause more crimes to be increased. I mean, that's really one of the really substantial problems in New York. They used to have many more beds, and they kind of made the number of beds available down to 8,000 instead of used to be 12. Well, that's 4,000 more people that are criminals who are just been released onto the community. And of course, if you're downsizing your police department, that's going to cause crime in itself to go up. And then when you got people on the steps of the courthouse bragging, bail reform is great. I've been arrested 80-something times, and I've been released each time. Well, that's going to cause crime to go up too. That's
a failure of the justice system more than the bail bond or anybody else's. If you let some guy do 80 times a crime and don't hold them responsible after 10 times or 15 times.
But I think that's part of the problem. We just have given up on accountability. And I think part of the problem is because our capacity to hold them. I think that our jails are full right now of very dangerous people because of the pandemic. And so now what are we going to do? If we start holding people accountable, we're going to have to put a lot of people in jail more than usual until they learn, okay, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they're going to be held accountable. And so I think that part of the problem is we don't have the capacity to hold people accountable right now. And the criminals know it.
So I want to ask you something, Ken. So are you trying, I don't know, are you trying to tell me that maybe the bail bond industry helps tames down crime? Is that what we're trying to, is that your purpose?
Well, I would say we do. We do it in several ways. Number one, we can do it because we get your case to the finish line quicker. And if we get the case resolved quicker, then the victim gets resolution and you get to go either free or you get to go serve your time. So I think that's one way. And then the second way is we provide supervision. I mean, we are talking to them weekly, or we make them come and see us weekly. We're talking to family members, and if they're telling us, or if we see a problem, we can report that to the court, and the court has the ability to bring them in Texas and say, what's going on? We're going to put you back in jail. So, yeah, I think that the bail community absolutely can decrease the crime wave. And I would say in the areas, in our urban areas where we're not, it's because the courts there have given up on caring whether people come to court.
Well, the urban area is just too much crowd of everything. It's too much of everything, a lot of stuff, things that happen, a lot of noise, a lot of things, but I could give it, that's why I give an example. I mean, when I was going to college, I'm a poor guy. I had my car parked like in front of, it's $250 at that time in New York. I didn't have $250. My car was worth $500. You know what I'm saying? It was a Cutlass Sierra, I think it was called, a Ford Cutlass Sierra. I don't even know they make them anymore. You understand? So I lost my car because I couldn't afford to get my car out. And after that, they pounded it and they threw another $2,000, $3,000 in fees to hold down the car. And then when they sold it, they probably didn't get the $500. That's what I'm trying to say. That sometimes good people would end up deluded or a victim of the system. They couldn't afford it at that time, or maybe they didn't have the $500 or the $1,000 that you did. And then I know we talked about before when we started the show, but I'm still, I want to lean into it. How do we protect people who are good people?
How do we protect good people who are good people?
Yeah.
Well, I would say we let the system work. I have faith in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And so if you think you're wrongly accused of a crime, you've got to let the system work. You've got situations, you've got attorneys coming to you and saying, you're looking at 30 years.
Right.
If you'll plead guilty, I can get you 5. Right. Well, I didn't do it. Well, you're going to be found guilty. Why? Well, because of the color of your skin. I don't buy that in urban areas, because the jury's going to have the same color of skin. The prosecutor's going to have the same color of skin. The judge is going to have the same color of skin. The defense attorney's going to have the same color of skin, because we're talking about urban areas. Yeah. I would say that our system is selling out people just to prevent the backlog from getting worse. And the problem with that is I don't think we have anybody that's willing to double the courts, because if we're going to double the courts, we have to double our facilities. We have to double the bailiffs. We have to double the court reporters. And we don't have any proposal anywhere to do that. And so the proposals that we're looking at are not fixing the system. They're just trying to prevent the system from collapsing. And that's really the big problem here. Is no matter what we want to say, nobody is looking at the real problem in our urban areas. How do we process large groups of people through the jail quickly and efficiently? Simple release has failed. It has failed completely. The only thing that has historically worked is a bail schedule. The courts are now saying as long as you have procedures in place to protect the poor, then they work and you can use them. But our friends on the left reject that. They don't want to use them, and they don't have anything to replace this with that works. And so we just have this stalemate where they won't admit what they're doing is wrong, except maybe a little bit. If they agree crime's increasing, they just won't admit it's because of bail reform. And so we have this kind of stalemate, and it may take an election to break the stalemate. I mean, in Texas, we've seen some movement recently because I think the polling has been so bad on these issues, and people want to be safe. I mean, even in our urban areas, in our minority communities, minority on minority crime, people want to be safe. And if we feel like we're not safe, I think that causes people to vote in ways that they would not have in the past. And I think crime and feeling safe overcomes identity politics.
I lived in an urban area and minority neighborhoods. The majority of people just want to have a safe home. They're very conservative. African Americans, I think they're the most religious people in the United States. I don't know why they're not Republicans, by the way, because when you go, I'm serious. When you go Sunday, you see their churches are full, double parked. Hispanics, their churches are full. Full. So it's that 3% or 4% who hold the whole neighborhood hostages. It's not as bad as it used to be. I lived around the crack epidemic. We had these drug dealers like warlords. Everyone holds a certain street, 89th Street, 29th Street, and everybody, was scared. You had these proud people who come home from work and have to lower their heads because they don't want to make eye contact with their kids who are selling drugs in front of their homes.
Well, I do think it's getting worse again. I think we're having areas which are no-go areas for the police. And so I think that we are entering a period where things are getting really bad again.
Okay, so what do you think should they do? They should have they heard the bonds industry?
Well, I think we've seen this. These bail funds coming out being used, and people are saying, well, y'all, people are opposing them because they're hurting the bail industry. I was on a podcast recently, and I learned a lot that I didn't know. I mean, bail funds are really bonding out people that our industry would not bond out because they're bonding out people that families have already given up on because of their criminal history. And I think the first thing bail funds discovered is the same thing we already knew. There's not a lot of first-time offenders in the jail. So for them to actually do stuff, they're bonding out some really dangerous people. And as people learn more and more about that, they're having a problem with it. Like, the leader of one of the bail funds said, well, their goal is to create chaos in the criminal justice system. Well, what about just helping poor people? But no, they're saying that we want to create chaos in the criminal justice. Well, criminal justice system doesn't like chaos, and chaos usually causes problems, and people will fight that. And you see states trying to limit the use of bail funds now as a result. So, but what else do we need to do? I think we need to start with accountability. If you don't show up for court, or if you have a criminal history and you've got a case pending and you get a new charge, is that really someone who should be out on bail? Do they need to be held?
No. Yeah.
And the problem is we don't have enough capacity to hold all those people. So we've got to figure out who we can hold and who we can release. And that requires the bailiff the magistrate to have more time. So we need to divert as many people away from magistration so they'll have the time they need to use their discretion to evaluate the people that need to be released that are left and the ones that they don't need to exercise their discretion on. This treating everybody the same is just a code word for create chaos so they don't have time to differentiate the really bad criminals from the first-time offenders. And we got to figure out a way to fix that. And that is the only system that's worked is we go back and we rely more on the bail industry, not less.
Well, I can assure you here in New York City, the mayor who was pro law enforcement, pro anti-crime, he's a black man. I think his name is Adam Smith.
Yes.
He was elected. Everybody got tired. Nobody wants to get marked. They started seeing their neighborhood go back to, like you said, I mean, it's a pipe dream. Oh, we should all live happy, everyone knows everybody. And at the end of the day, Americans, people like me and you, they want a safe place to live. They want a safe environment to live. Okay.
Well, I was listening to a podcast out of New York on this issue, and there was a career prosecutor. He's been prosecuting crimes at the DA's office for 40-something years, and he was explaining the math that the sponsor of the bail reform was using to argue that there's not really been any recidivism and that their bail reform has worked, and he's compared that to the real numbers. So the author of the reforms are saying, oh, there's 3% recidivism. And he's like, They are playing with the numbers. They're cooking the books. The real numbers are 40, 50, 60% recidivism.
Yeah.
And you look at it and it's scary. You go, exactly. Well, that's exactly why crime's increasing, because we can't be honest people to talk about crime. It's now become so political, and we have to get politics out of it and say, we have to work together to have a safe street. So let's start with this street. Let's make it safe. Then let's go to that street and the next street, and we make it safe. And to do that, we have to have a no tolerance. I mean, it's like broken windows policy, like you said. And we have to get people, and we have to have a place to send them if they're not doing what they need to do.
You're absolutely right. All right, Ken, I want to appreciate you for coming on the podcast. Do you want to, where people can find you, or do you want to promote anything? I mean,
Sure. If you would like to have more information about true criminal justice reform that works, or what common sense bail reform looks like, I would encourage you to visit the Professional Bondsmen of Texas website, pbtx.com. We have a blog on there. We have some informational links for elected officials corner, and I think I already mentioned our blog. We have a lot of information on there, and and we have a podcast, and we also have a YouTube channel. We just have a great deal of information explaining why crime is increasing from a law enforcement perspective and the bail industry perspective. And if you're from Texas, I have a book on the which is a practice guide for the bail industry called Goods on Bail, and it's really just the relevant statutes applicable to the bail industry.
All right, thank you, Ken, for coming. I appreciate you. I had a good conversation. I learned a lot from you. I hope you come back again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it, and I do not mind talking to anybody about these issues. I don't mind arguing with anybody, but so much of the discussion today is, if you disagree with the other side, that you're called a racist, a liar, and you can't have discussion anymore. We just end up calling each other names. So I can't thank you enough for having me, and thanks for the great discussion.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you. God bless you, man. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.